Have you ever wondered why the highway patrol block the highways before you think they should, when they think a snowstorm is coming? And have you ever been kind of irked by that? Well, I'm here to tell you why they do that. It's because of people like me, who pay absolutely no attention to whatever the highway patrolmen used to tell us before they started to block the highways. When I was teaching, I coached debate. And one year I had some ninth graders show up that really had promise, and I put them together in a 4-person team. And I worked real hard with them. We had some really successful times after a disastrous beginning when the boy on this team, there were 3 girls, when the boy in one round, the judge said he said 72 times and threw up in the wastebasket once. And I was beginning to wonder if this was going to be the team I thought. We also had been to Minneapolis. These ninth graders, those 4 ninth graders were along, and we got stranded one time for 4 days in a snowstorm over a Super Bowl weekend. So it should not have been a surprise that sophomores, they became better, and they were my top junior varsity team. And by the time they were juniors, they were on my varsity team. And I thought they had special talent, and I thought we should get out of the area a little bit, give them some tough competition, because I had high hopes for them going to the state earlier or later in the season. So we planned a trip way down to southern Minnesota that would take us 5 hours to get there. We had to be there on Friday morning about 11 o'clock, so figured we have to go the night before if we're going to get that far away. It started to snow. Somebody in the school said, you know, there are some storm warnings out. I said, oh, this is okay. It's going to be fine. We got in the car after school and we're driving out here down Highway 59. Starting to snow, but it didn't look bad. Started to snow a little bit more, but it still didn't look too bad until we got to the interstate. Suddenly when we got to the interstate, the snow was coming down and it was blowing and I couldn't see the traffic on the road. So we drove into Fergus Falls and then stopped at a truck stop. At the same time we were going in, a car showed up with 4 men who got out of the car. And they told us that they had just come from Alexandria and it had taken them an hour and a half to drive 35 miles from Alexandria. I found out that all 4 of them were preachers. And my first thought was, now they have a lot more going for them than I have going for me, so maybe we better change our plans. So we sat in the truck stop for a little bit, and I decided, you know, Highway 59 was pretty good, so I guess we better go back home. And I explained to the kids that if we went home, we were not going to this tournament. Well, that was okay. We get back on the interstate, and it's really bad, and I'm thinking, oh, but Highway 59 is going to be just fine. Well, we got on Highway 59, and it wasn't. It was just awful. I knew that up the road was a little town that would have a place for us to stop. And so I drove up to Elizabeth. And the only place in Elizabeth that I knew I could go to and stop was the bar at Elizabeth. So we get to the bar at Elizabeth, and I go in with my 3 sophomore girls and my sophomore boy, and there isn't a woman in the place. There's a whole pile of local people. Some of them, you know, the lawyer bar stool type, and some of them the town degenerate type, but they're all in the bar. The bartender was behind the bar with his great big Doberman pincer dog. And there was a setup crew for a band that was supposed to come the next night. And the setup crew had spent time putting up a stage and some curtains and some instruments. And this was the setting. We sat down at the table and ordered some food, looked around, and I told the girls to just plain mind their own business. Sure enough, the band crew guys started coming over and asking them questions, and I told them that if they were old enough to be in that bar, they were too old for these girls, so they should just disappear. At which point one of them said to me, well, you look old enough. And I knew that, you know, we were in for a good evening. Well, the storm got worse. The people in the bar drank more. The setup crew sort of rolled up in their curtains and slept on the floor. The local bar stool lawyers plus the degenerate crowd had sifted down, and by the time the bar was ready to close, the locals had all walked home. The bartender was drinking himself into oblivion, and pretty soon he was sound asleep. I took the 9th young man that I had with me. Remember, he's a sophomore. He's about 15, 16 years old. I took him up to the bar, went and got Coke for him every half hour and said, you and I are going to sit here and play cards, and you are not going to fall asleep. If you do, I'm going to just bop you on the head till you wake up. So we sat there all night, turned on the TV, found out there was no travel in the area. We couldn't go anywhere. But we sat there all night and stayed awake. And the dog, the big Doberman Pinscher dog that I was scared to death of, nobody was taking him outside, and he was peeing all over the floor. And that was the way the whole night went. We watched on the TV the next morning, and about 9, 10 o'clock, they decided that the storm was getting a little bit better. We had called home, and I figured we could get out of that particular place a little bit. Now, you need to remember that, or need to be told, that these 4 students had already been stranded in the cities with me. We'd already driven on icy roads. For some reason, I never did understand why their parents didn't make it to that bar to rescue them, but nobody did. They seemed to have faith in me sitting there in this bar with all these strange people. But we finally got out of the bar about 10:30 in the morning and drove back to Detroit Lakes, where we were safe and sound. But the point is, if you ever wonder why they closed these roads and why they put up barricades, it's because of people like me, who still gets angry and wants to cross the barricades. Thank you.